After tidying up the room, Rich had a visitor. His place was an old 4-story building facing the street, with a small bar on the first and second floors, and regular tenants on the third and fourth floors. Many hotels or taverns have rooms available for short-term rentals, ranging from 3 to 5 days or a week, and even accepting temporary leases for just a day, resembling a hotel or inn. This model was initially discovered from drunkards. The tavern owner would give them a bed and charge extra. Soon, most taverns started doing the same thing because no one would complain about taking money from drunkards. Alcohol is a peculiar thing. It can make some people pass out and pay more to sleep in a high-class room for a night, while it can make others more direct and simple. Therefore, every bar and tavern needs some rooms. This also meant that Rich's current place of residence couldn't be too remote, in a sparsely populated suburb. People came and went here. There were many pedestrians passing by during the day and night. The police said they didn't find any witnesses, but that could be because the criminal was experienced. In reality, there couldn't be no witnesses, whether it was the other tenants on the second floor or the bartender behind the bar counter on the first floor, or the few scattered customers. They couldn't possibly know nothing. But they wouldn't say anything. First of all, Rich had no direct vested interest with them, and secondly, it wasn't necessary for them to be targeted by the federal tax authorities because of an unfamiliar and unrelated person. Everyone chose to remain silent, but this happened to let the police misunderstand certain things and gain some leeway in subsequent operations. Just as he finished tidying up the messy room, someone came to his door. It was a few newspaper-selling kids. They had bulging leather bags slung over their shoulders, and each person looked like they were struggling, their faces red. Partly because of the heavy leather bags, and partly because of excitement. The headlines promised them that if they delivered this money and remembered some details in the room, they would receive an extra reward this month, with each person getting no less than $50. This money was important to these kids of their age. In 2 or 3 years, they would have to start living independently. They had to save up some money before that to face society. Opportunities were hard to come by, even if it was just $50. Before closing the door, Rich glanced outside. The small tavern he was in was right by the main road, and outside the door was a corridor. Beyond the railing of the corridor was the road, and standing where he was, he could see most things outside at a glance. There was nothing unusual, but his mind was already active. With his years of experience in fighting against, these kids were very suspicious. The newspaper boys themselves had been here these past few days for transactions, but the newspaper sellers would also come, except they wouldn't enter the room, they would just stand outside the corridor. They gave these kids a large amount of change, so naturally they had to keep an eye on them to prevent them from running away. By protecting their own property, they could also intimidate these kids. But today, there were no newspaper sellers outside the corridor. What did that represent? Any abnormal phenomenon implies the existence of deeper problems. There are 2 possible reasons for this. The first possibility is that he does not want to have any direct relationship with here, or with himself. The second possibility is that he knows it is dangerous here, so even though he cares about those small change, he did not appear on the scene, but he has a way to ensure that his money will not be in trouble. This conclusion can be drawn without thinking, otherwise he would not let these newsboys bring a large amount of change to exchange for bills. In addition to the things Rich encountered before, he already has a high probability of knowing what will happen next. He is not afraid, but instead feels a little excited, a little eager to try. How much money is here? He brought a small wooden box from the side and placed it on the cart, letting the newsboys pour the money into it. Several children said while pouring, "A total of $5,000, sir." $5,000. Rich laughed. His eyes glanced at the newsboys' leather wallets. "This is a surprising number. I thought it would be less." This amount of money is too much, enough to directly convict him, which also confirms his idea that someone is setting him up, and he is the one in the plot. If the people from the tax bureau or the investigation bureau rush in later, and he cannot explain the source of this money and why they are in his room, he may face serious charges. At that time, as long as the other party proposes a deal, he will definitely not be able to escape the clutches of those people, and can only do as they demand, unless he wants to spend his life in prison. He nodded without saying anything, and when the wooden box was filled with $5,000 in coins, he pushed the cart into the inner room and greeted, "I'll go to the bathroom for a moment, please wait for me." $5,000 in coins are very heavy. The 5-cent coins are the lightest, weighing 3.7 grams, while the 50-cent coins are the heaviest, weighing 6.1 grams. Adding the 10-cent and 25-cent coins, the average weight of each coin is a little over 4 grams. $5,000, 130 pounds. Each newsboy has more than 20 pounds of coins in their bags, so it's no wonder their faces are a little redder than usual. Just going upstairs makes them feel noticeably strenuous. After entering the inner room, Rich did not rush out. He dragged the money-filled box into the bathroom and found a pair of sturdy pants from the freshly washed clothes in the cart. He tightened the trouser legs on both sides, and grabbed handfuls of coins and stuffed them into the trouser legs. When the box became lighter, he directly held it and poured the coins inside. Both trouser legs were filled with coins. He used a belt to tie his waist and pushed the two trouser legs apart to form a stick-like shape. He then stuffed it into the crude toilet drain. When these old buildings were built, there were no various humanized bend pipe designs. Not to mention bend pipes, even parallel pipes would cause the upstairs feces to directly pour back, so its drainage design is a straight main pipe, and each floor has a downward sloping pipe directly connected to the main pipe. There is a one-way board at the connection between the main pipe and the septic tank. The advantage of this design is that there is no backflow phenomenon. People living on the ground floor do not need to worry about watching the toilet spray feces outside. The disadvantage is that sometimes it will make the house smell strange. If an exhaust fan is installed, there is no need to worry about these. He hung a soap box on the belt head, a simple wooden box, which ensures that the belt head floats on the sewage. When he takes it out at night, he does not have to jump into the septic tank to search for it. After a faint sinking sound and the sound of the wooden board rebounding against the pipe, he breathed a sigh of relief. Before long, Rich returned to the room clutching several stacks of banknotes. The newsboys were already a little impatient waiting for him. Their attention was completely focused on Rich's hands, and those thick stacks of banknotes. He sat on the edge of the bed and casually picked up a few newspapers. He unfolded the rolled-up bills secured with rubber bands and handed them out to different children. "You count first, then I'll count." This was his rule, and people were willing to do it. This mutual counting method established an important trust channel between Rich and these traders. The children counted slowly. When the first child finished counting a stack of $10 bills in his hand, he handed the money to Rich while saying the final number. Rich counted again in front of him, then directly put the money into the newspaper, wrapped it up, and used a rubber band to secure it. He handed the wrapped newspaper to the child. This also was how he always did it. In his original words, the least noticeable thing in the newsboys' wallets was something related to newspapers. This could prevent them from being targeted by certain people. This explanation was also accepted by the newsboys. Since then, whenever the amount of money exceeded $50, Rich would wrap it in a newspaper and hand it to them. It had become their accustomed habit. Counting one stack of money after another, wrapping them in newspapers and securing them with rubber bands, Rich sent the children away and immediately returned to his room. He took out large bundles of money from several pockets. He played a little trick, withholding a significant amount of money that was supposed to be given to those children. It was a simple trick. While counting the money, he used his ring finger to lift up a portion of the bills, bypassing the middle finger, and then at the moment of finishing the count, he retracted the middle finger and pressed the money down with his palm, effectively concealing it in his hand. At this moment, the attention of the counting child was focused on the stack of money placed on the newspaper by Rich, allowing him to easily put back the portion of money he withheld into his pocket. He needed the rubber band. Then, the money that both the newsboy and Rich had counted together would be wrapped in the newspaper, secured with a rubber band, and in just a matter of 2 seconds or less, it would be out of sight. Since the children were relatively young and Rich was older, they didn't dare to offend Rich's authority and wouldn't suggest counting the money again. Rich smoothly took the money back. If they had the courage to resist, they wouldn't just be newsboys now. Approximately $2,000 to $3,000, he didn't count. Since the other party tried to trap him using such means, he couldn't blame himself for taking some compensation. After he finished everything and hid the money, the door of the room suddenly burst open.